Hey folks, I'm back. If I'm tearing up, it's because the sun is in my eyes. It's a bright, dawning day here, but we have a few problems to tackle in the garden, and I thought I would take you along. I've struggled in the last year to put out any content. I didn't really know what to offer that would be helpful, and that wasn't already out there in heaps and people doing it much better and more succinctly than I can. But let's take a look at our problems here, and I'll walk you through the plans that I intend to walk you through this season. All right. So there's the garden. I haven't seeded it or planted anything yet because, to be honest, it's been a bit of a difficult spring. We're very smoky here. It's a relatively clear day, but you can still see a bit of a haze on the horizon. And it's not too stinky today, but when it is really smoky, it's quite troublesome. So one of our issues is this fella. He's a bit of a lean-to, relatively minor. What we'll do is we'll put up a little cross brace in here to square him up like that, and then he should be sturdy, and I'll be able to grow some, I don't know, loofahs or gourds or something on that. But the biggest issue you may be able to notice is all the weeds and the relatively thin layer of mulch, so we need to deal with that. It's not quite so difficult here in the raised garden because we can rake down in the aisles and then throw down a whole bunch of new mulch, and that should do a relatively good job, and it's not interfering with the beds because there's a distinction there. There's a height difference. We do have some that like to try to grow in through the sides of the beds, but for the most part that doesn't impede my ability to plant things, and so I try to keep them from seeding, but I'm not super pressed about it. On the other hand, the circle garden is in need of a major renovation. So when we first laid the circle garden down, it was just bare earth, and there were already dandelions living in that bare earth. But as you can see now, the lines between the beds and the paths has basically been obliterated. Not only that, but over time, the edges blur quite a bit. It's very difficult to tell where the beds begin and end, and therefore they've sort of shifted as dirt and mulch has washed out here and there with the rain and things like that. And of course, this very heavy presence of weeds. Some of it is like this, which is horsetail. Nope, not horsetail. Foxtail grass. Very stubborn. That can be pulled up and dealt with. On that corner there, we have a bit of a quackgrass problem. And in that corner there by the strawberries last year, we did have some Canada thistle. I'm not sure if it's Canada thistle or the other one. South thistle. No, south thistle. It was south thistle, if I recall correctly. I did my best to dig all of that out of there last year. Every bit of root that I could manage, and I think I've mostly got that under control. But these dandelions and the grass, I went through everything last year. I spent, I think, a good week or two doing almost nothing else but just digging out each and every single one of these, and taking as much root as I could with me as at the time. We also put down a little bit of fresh mulch. You can see there's a little bit thicker mulch in some areas. It didn't work. And so sometimes the best solution isn't the possible solution. For me, spending the next 3 years continuing to battle this, when we put this down, we put down cardboard and then we put down manure on top of that. It was well-aged manure, and we planted right into the manure. But the weeds came on through, and the weeds have kept coming on through. And so we've been fighting with this, I think, for 3 years now. And to be honest, I'm tired. This section of the garden has been a bit left derelict. You can see I didn't clean up last fall. I usually don't clean up too much because I want the birds to be able to get at the seeds. Unfortunately, they didn't get nearly as much of the seeds as I could wish, and now I will have zinnias in here forever, but that's okay. It's the least of my issues. So I'll just take you through and show you from the back. On the south side, lovely dill. So that is the circle garden. I love the shape of the circle, but the plan as it currently stands is we're gonna till. I think we're gonna till. We're gonna take out all of the wire fencing. We're gonna take out all of the posts and everything that could possibly go badly wrong here. And then once we've tilled it all under, we're gonna do a really thorough job of tilling. Now I know that's not necessarily advisable for a lot of these things, but honestly, dandelions here, you can't pull them and make them die just by pulling them, and I really prefer not to use chemicals in the garden if I don't have to. And so tilling is our next best option. Now, I know a lot of people in the online gardening community prefer to do no-till methods, and I think that's fine if you can make that work for you, but this hasn't worked for us here. And to add to that, this ground is so hard I can't plant any of my root vegetables in it because they will go down about 1/2 inch and then they will go sideways because the ground is so hard. It's a blend of sand and clay that really hardens into something very similar to concrete once it's been wet and compacted. And there's just not enough fiber in there to do a very good job of holding moisture or of keeping it aerated well. So we're going to till. All of the organic material that's in the garden is going to go into the ground, which will be helpful. And then we're going to rebuild this thing, and we're going to rebuild it as raised beds. And that is where you come in. And that is where my trusty chainsaw will come in. And it depends a little bit on exactly how we want to do this. But I have some possible layouts that I'd love for you to look at and tell me what you think. I have this lovely pile of small-ish trees, small enough that we haven't bothered to use it for firewood, but big enough that it's not going to just decompose immediately. So I'm planning on using quite a lot of this. And then if we are going to be doing weaving, I do have a collection, or I do have a stand of poplar suckers that are encroaching on the neighbor's field that I have permission to cut down and use green to weave with. So if we'll be doing weaving, it'll be curved edges. If we decide to go with a pattern that has anything of a circular shape to it, then we'll go with a woven edge, and if not, then we will go with something that's a little bit more like this here, which was a sample I put together. Obviously this jagged end would go in the ground, but just to give you a bit of a sense of what that would look like, something like that. For long straight edges, it's just much quicker and less labor intensive than these. And also these are not going to be as effective as I had hoped. Part of the issue is this has actually stood up really well, considering it's been here, 4 or 5 years now. But these are really loose because they've shrunk quite a bit, and also these are decomposing where they're in the ground. And as you can see with this one, it's leaning out pretty extensively, so any posts I want to put in the ground are going to need to be much thicker than that. And a thick poplar like this isn't going to weave itself nicely around really thick pieces of wood. So I have a slightly different plan for the weavings that involve using larger pieces of poplar. And instead of having one post and weaving around both sides, I'm planning on having 2 posts and just layering the wood in between those 2 posts. And that way, if we need to replace the posts, it'll be much easier than if they're already entwined into wood and dirt. So that's the plan if we need to do weaving. Also, I just got to show you my very fine collection of volunteered red romaine lettuce from the mother. I grew a whole bunch of lettuce on purpose, but none of it looks that good, so we'll see. Now, you will notice the raised beds do also have weeds in them. There is a lot of weeds in some of them, but honestly, because the ground is so much softer in the raised beds, it is much easier to deal with in raised beds than it is in the ground, just because this dirt is so hard. In the beds, I can take the weeds out in one whole piece. And also it's a lot easier for me because I don't have to get on my knees on the ground. I can sit on a stool and I can work away at it one bed at a time, looser soil. It's a lot easier for me personally to manage the raised beds. And so my plan is to try to get this raised as well. A couple of considerations is the amount of topsoil we have available and how much it will take. If we build the raised beds that high, as if we didn't bury them, that would be a huge amount of dirt. I'd have to truck some in. I might have to anyway, but I won't need it in such huge quantity if I do about half that size. So I'm taking that into consideration as well. And yeah, so that's the basis. That's the information we need to know on the outside. And now I will take you inside and we can look at some of my sketches and you can let me know what you think. All right, so these are some of my potential sketches here. This is the one that's currently in the ground. One thing I have noticed is that the path through the middle has widened considerably, but also 2 feet between the beds in the curves is just not quite enough room to move comfortably. It'd be much more accessible if it was 3 feet, or at least 2.5. So we'll see about potentially widening some of that if we decide to go with that pattern. But these are a couple of sort of potential patterns that I've played around with. And then I also have that possibility there. And if you have the time, I'll just walk you through them and you can comment below which you think is best. So several of these designs are based on keyhole gardens, whereas the more square is kind of designed around a knot garden. That's not really super relevant, but let's say that's number 1. Again, I'd want to widen the paths a little bit. I do like curves in the garden, but the accessibility here is going to be a little bit less ideal because you're not going to be able to get a wheelbarrow in through here or wagons. Although you can access the garden from every side, which is nice. Whereas this one, you can only get in from the one side, which is actually less than ideal. And so you might end up just taking out the paths entirely and doing that. But then we do have all this dead space in the corners. This is about a 22 by 22 foot square of garden that we're working on here. So this is the current layout, except that the paths have gotten considerably wider. And I think a 3-foot path would be wide enough to get my wheelbarrow and my wagon through the center. Even if it can't get around the outer curves, just being able to get it all the way through the middle is going to be very helpful. So we'll call that number 2, that number 3, and that one is number 4. And then there's some more square designs. And again, so if we're going with square ones, we can do all of the side walls with lumber that is stacked vertically. We'll call that number 5. I'm not really a huge fan of that one, so I didn't even color it in for you. We'll call this one number 6. That one is number 7. You can see there's a little bit of the curve left in there, but you still have access all the way around, but you still have the sort of the keyhole garden in the center. Kind of a fun idea. If you made these paths a little bit wider coming in and out, you'd be able to get the wagons around the circle, because this is a bit of a wider path here, so there's some accessibility that way. And then this one, there's like super wide paths. Okay, that's going to be number 8. super wide paths with the idea of planting strawberries or other short herbs down the center between the wheel ruts for the wagon or the wheelbarrow. So that's one way to get extra use of that space without actually having to build as much beds. Yeah, so that's one option there. That's quite a wide path. That's a 4-foot path rather than a 2-foot path. This is all 2 by 2. 1 square equals 2 feet in this scale here. And then this one, basically, in all these circle ones, I was drawing it from the center out. So you can see the outer corners kind of recede from the middle, whereas this one, I used the corners as my guide, started there, and then worked my way in to make the circles. It gives just a bit of a different shape. And then, so we'll call that number 9. And then number 10 over here is using that same idea, but instead of this being one large block, I've divided into 2 smaller, thinner blocks to have more of the shape of the current garden, which is here, but with these side walls or with these corners coming all the way out to the path so that it's really uniform. And so you can see sort of the difference there. There's the outer corner of the corner bed there, whereas this comes right to the path width. This is going to feel a little bit more enclosing, whereas this one is a little bit more sort of opening into the garden and then closing in and then opening out again in the center where there's quite a bit of space. One of my thoughts for this one had been, or for this either way, because there's so much room in the middle, it was to put a water feature in the center. I found I don't actually do that. I really love the convenience of being able to run wheelbarrows and everything right through the center of the garden. One of my thoughts had been with this pattern was to put build up a little seat on the inner corner there to sit on, but I'm not sure I actually would because there's no shade offered here other than what the plants can give. So those are, so this one will be number 10. Those are kind of the ideas I'm working with as far as redesigning. And I would love to hear from you, which you think has the best potential, or if you think there's an alternative shape or design that you think would be best. It is a 22-foot by 22-foot square. If you have alternative designs and you want to sketch them out, you can send them to me over on Instagram. We're at the Pumpkin Gardener on Instagram as well. There should be a link under this video. Let me know if that link doesn't work, by the way. I'm not great at all this stuff, to be very honest. Anyways, so that's the kind of the plan here. I would love to get feedback from you. We definitely got to get working on this really, really soon. I want to clean out most of that garden today and see if my husband can get it tilled, possibly tomorrow. And then I got to start building. So it's a big project. Oh, you can see. Can you see the garden behind me? It's really, if the lighting's terrible, ignore. Yeah, so the wheelbarrow's just right in the garden there. Let me know what you think. As always, I would love it if you would comment, just to let me know that you're watching and where you're watching from. I'm always very curious. And I have been struggling with the idea of what's helpful content. I know a lot of people are doing all sorts of different gardening content, and I'm not trying to compete with that because, to be honest, I can't, and I don't really have the energy to. I'm sure many of you can understand that. I have been sort of collecting some tips and tricks and ideas for accessibility purposes, for ease of use type things, and so I do have some more stuff coming out. There's the biggest issue I have is I hate the editing aspect of things. So I'm trying to film these videos and not edit them and just get them out, and hope that you can get friendly with the skip ahead button, because it takes hours and hours of editing to the point where my computer can't hardly process it, and my eyes get really, really tired. And it's just, it sucked a lot of the joy out of it for me in that first year that I started doing this. And so I'm trying to do it in a more relaxed, more casual style. If that's not for you, that's okay. I'm not offended. But if you stick through to the very end, let me know. Give me a little thumbs up or a thumbs sideways if you're just hanging on. And we will see ya.